Lords. The Noble Lord Banner described Amendment 184 as compelling, and I will entirely agree with that, and in the interest of time, that's all I'm going to say on that. I'm just going to briefly speak to Amendment 218, taking us back some time to the Noble Lady Baroness Pinnock, who's already introduced the idea of having a review of land value capture. Now, I'm going to be brief, and I'm going to brandish a historical figure in defence of this suggestion, which perhaps may surprise the benches to my right, because I'm going to start by saying I agree with Winston Churchill, which is not a phrase that I bring out very often, but I do in this particular context, because I can quote Sir Winston from 1909, who said, "The landlord who happened to own a plot of land on the outskirts of the centre of one of our great cities sits still and does nothing. Roads are made, streets are made, railway services are improved, electric light turns night into day, electric trams glide swiftly to and fro, water is brought from reservoirs 100 miles off in the mountains. And all the while the landlord sits still. To not one of these improvements does the land monopolist, as a land monopolist, contribute, and yet by every one of them the value of his land is sensibly enhanced." Now that's addressing exactly what the Noble Lady, the issue that was identified back more than a century ago, the issue that still exists and that we haven't come to deal with.
It was the Liberals there.
Okay, I'm not going to get that far into the history. But I will declare an interest in that land value tax is long-term Green Party policy, and one that I'm very happy to talk about at length, but I'm not going to do that because that's not what this amendment does. But I think it's worth thinking about the fact that the problem with how we tax land goes back a very long way. There was a Royal Commission on the Housing of the Working Classes set up in 1885. It was the first time that an inquiry had referred to land value taxation. It was called site value rating then. And it said this would be a better way to solve our housing crisis. So these are issues we've been wrestling with and failing to solve for a very long time. And just my final point is that this amendment by itself doesn't deal with the crunching, terrible elephant in the room issue of council tax. But it starts to provide the government with a way forward to open these issues. This is all regarded as too politically difficult, too challenging, too complicated to explain, and I know what it's like to try and explain land value tax in 15 seconds because it's a challenge. But 35 years on from when council tax was created, it was an emergency crunch measure created by the Treasury after the political disaster of the poll tax. It's a deeply regressive tax. Someone living in a home worth £100,000 pays an effective tax rate 5 times as high as someone in £1 million property. The average net council tax is only 2.7 times higher for the top 10% of properties than the bottom 10%. So this is something we've got to address. This amendment doesn't address all of that or even the bulk of it, but it just starts to inch us into some space where we tackle some issues that desperately need to be tackled.